So think about the sheer number of new businesses that launch every single year. Now, think about how many of them actually survive. It's kind of brutal, right? The harsh reality is that operating in a state of extreme uncertainty usually just leads to failure. We see these wildly successful founders and we tend to think, wow, they just got incredibly lucky, or maybe they have this magical instinct that the rest of us are completely missing. But what if that just isn't true? What if building a successful company isn't about crossing your fingers and hoping for a lucky break, but instead it's about following a disciplined scientific process? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're breaking down the 5 key takeaways from Eric Ries' absolutely groundbreaking framework, the Lean Startup. Okay, let's dive right into this. Can startup success actually be engineered? According to Eric Ries, the answer is an absolute yes. For the longest time, the prevailing wisdom was basically this. Because startups operate in total chaos, they should just ditch traditional management altogether. People took this sort of chaotic, just-do-it approach. You know the drill. You build a product in secret, launch it to the world, and cross your fingers that people buy it. But, well, that method leads to catastrophically high failure rates. Reese realized that we actually needed a scientific approach to innovation to replace all that chaos. We needed a reliable system that teaches you exactly how to steer, when to turn, and when to just put your head down and persevere. All right, here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. Welcome to extreme uncertainty. 2. Entrepreneurs and management. 3. The validated learning process. 4. Mastering innovation accounting. 5. Build, measure, learn, repeat. And finally, 6. Pivot, persevere, and subscribe. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Welcome to extreme uncertainty. Before we get into the specific rules of the Lean methodology, we need to properly define what a startup actually is. A startup is defined as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Now, what's really fascinating here is what is completely missing from that definition. Notice how there's literally zero mention of the size of the company, the sector of the economy, or the specific industry it operates in. A startup is defined entirely by that very last phrase, extreme uncertainty. So if you're building something brand new and you honestly don't know who your customer is or what the final product should even look like, well, congratulations, you're operating in a startup environment. Moving on to Section 2, Entrepreneurs and Management. That definition perfectly bridges us right into our first 2 key takeaways of the Lean Startup methodology. Entrepreneurs are everywhere, and entrepreneurship is management. We've all heard the classic myth in business, right? The 2 college kids tinkering away in some mythical garage to build the next tech giant. But because we just defined a startup by its conditions of uncertainty rather than its size, it means our first pillar holds absolutely true. Entrepreneurs are everywhere. You really don't have to be wearing a gray hoodie in a Silicon Valley garage eating ramen to be an entrepreneur. As the source material points out, large corporate organizations like Intuit or even a massive media company launching a new app have corporate product managers who are functioning exactly like startup entrepreneurs. If your team is facing the unknown, you are an entrepreneur. Simple as that. And since entrepreneurs are literally everywhere, building these new human institutions, we arrive at pillar number 2. Entrepreneurship is management. Because a startup is an institution facing absolute chaos, it absolutely requires management. But, and this is key, it doesn't need that standard, rigid corporate forecasting and spreadsheet management of the 20th century. Instead, it requires a totally new, tailored scientific management process. You can't just abandon all process and rely entirely on a founder's gut instinct. You have to actively manage the chaos. Section 3. The validated learning process. In a traditional factory setup, progress is measured by the production of high-quality physical goods. But what exactly is the unit of progress in a startup? In the Lean Startup framework, the true unit of progress is this concept called validated learning. Listen, startups don't just exist to make stuff, make a quick buck, or even serve customers in the very short term. They exist to learn how to build a sustainable business. And this learning, it's not just some theoretical whiteboard exercise. It has to be validated empirically. You got to test your value hypothesis, like does this product actually deliver value? And your growth hypothesis, meaning how are new customers even going to find out about it? You have to act like a scientist running experiments, not just a visionary guessing what people might want. So the absolutely crucial question becomes, how do we actually run those experiments? Well, we use a minimum viable product, or an MVP. Eric Ries defines it as that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. I actually want to slow down right here because this concept gets wildly misunderstood. An MVP is not just a cheap, broken, terrible product. It's simply the fastest possible way to test your assumptions. Our sources give some amazing examples. Dropbox, they literally just used a simple video to demonstrate a product that didn't even fully exist yet, just to see if people actually wanted it. Another company, Food on the Table, started with literally one single customer and a chef physically buying their groceries. It lacked all the fancy automated software features, but it fueled massive validated learning without wasting months of coding and money. Section 4, Mastering Innovation Accounting. Okay, so let's say you've launched your MVP. You're out of the building, you're gathering data. How do you actually measure if you're making real progress or if you're just running around in circles? To actually improve your outcomes, you cannot rely on traditional accounting designed for stable, predictable companies. You need innovation accounting, which relies on 3 very actionable steps. First, you establish the baseline. Basically, where are you right now with your MVP? Second, you tune the engine. You make a tweak or a change to your product and run a new experiment to see if your metrics actually improve. And third, based entirely on that data, you decide whether to pivot or persevere. This framework completely forces you to objectively measure progress instead of just relying on the overly optimistic instincts of a founder. But hey, huge warning here, you absolutely have to use the right metrics. There is a massive, massive difference between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. Vanity metrics are those things like gross cumulative user counts or total page views. Sure, they look fantastic on a chart going up and to the right, but they are incredibly deceptive. Why? Because they don't tell you why things are happening. Instead, lean startups focus on actionable metrics. These are often gathered through split testing, where you show half your users one feature and half another, and through cohort analysis. Good metrics have to be actionable, accessible to everyone on your team, and auditable so that everyone knows the data is actually credible. Section 5. Build, measure, learn, repeat. Once you have that MVP and your actionable metrics locked in place, you're finally ready to get behind the ultimate steering wheel of a startup. And this iconic build, measure, learn feedback loop brilliantly illustrates exactly what that steering wheel looks like. The fundamental core activity of any startup is to turn ideas into products, measure how customers respond using those actionable metrics we just talked about, and then learn whether to change course or keep going. But here's the absolute most important part to focus on: minimizing the total time through the loop. The faster your team can cycle through this entire circle, the faster you're going to learn, and the dramatically higher your chances are of engineering success before you inevitably run out of cash. Now, what happens when you complete that loop and realize, hey, our current strategy totally isn't working? You don't just blindly push forward, you execute a pivot. A pivot is a strategic decision to make a fundamental change in your product, your business model, or your target market, and it is based entirely on validated learning. It's a structured, scientific course correction. Listen, pivoting isn't a failure, it's just the realization that a fundamental hypothesis was wrong and you need to test a new one. If the data says you're right, you persevere. If it says you're wrong, you pivot. And as you continuously iterate through this loop, you're ultimately looking to power your business with a sustainable engine of growth. The lean startup identifies 3 specific engines, and they're all driven by one simple rule: new customers come from the actions of past customers. So there's the sticky engine, which focuses pretty much entirely on retaining users and keeping a super low churn rate. Then there's the viral engine, where awareness spreads from person to person naturally, with a really high referral rate. And finally, the paid engine, which relies on making absolutely sure that the lifetime value of a customer is significantly higher than what it costs you to acquire them in the first place. Section 6, Pivot, Persevere, and Subscribe. We've covered a ton of ground today, navigating all the way from the sheer chaos of extreme uncertainty down to the rigid science of a feedback loop. Let's bring this masterclass to a close by summarizing exactly what we've learned. Here are the 5 core pillars of Eric Ries' framework to lock into your memory. Number 1, entrepreneurs are everywhere, regardless of how big or small your company is. Number 2, entrepreneurship is actually a specific type of management required to navigate extreme uncertainty. Number 3, validated learning is the true ultimate unit of startup progress, often achieved through a minimum viable product. Number 4, innovation accounting ensures you're actually using actionable, auditable metrics instead of fluff vanity numbers. And finally, number 5, the build, measure, learn feedback loop is your steering wheel. You gotta cycle through it as rapidly as possible to figure out whether to pivot or persevere. If you found this structured breakdown helpful at all, make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Edge Library channel. We regularly distill massive, complex business concepts into these focused, high-yield explainers, so you can just keep leveling up your knowledge super efficiently. I want to leave you with one final thought to apply to your own work today. Whether you're launching a weekend side hustle or you're leading a massive corporate initiative, stop trying to magically guess what the market wants while sitting in a boardroom. Get out of the building. Look at your project right now and ask yourself, what is the next fundamental hypothesis you need to test? Build your MVP, run the experiment, and start learning. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.